Hey everybody, welcome back. It is time for my July wrap-up. For the month of July, surprisingly, even with starting a new job, I managed to read 11 books this month, which is pretty good, but there were several books in there that I just could not put down. So here is my July wrap-up. First three books I read more toward the end of June, but finished them in the first beginning of July, and they were the Ton Dorn series by L.A. Kelly, which consists of Ton, Return to Alastair, and the Scarlet Trefoil. The Ton Dorn series is a Christian historical fiction about a young man who is raised to be an assassin called a Dark Angel. And one night he is sent to assassinate a young woman who still haunts his past from a previous encounter with her and her family. Instead of assassinating her, he rescues her along with some street children from his place of training to save them from the same life that he had. Now, I was looking forward to reading this book, and it had some great themes in it. I really enjoyed his acceptance of grace and forgiveness. Now, when you read Christian fiction, there's always that good balance between the actual story and how the character's faith helps that story along and gives that story a lift. I found in this book that it weighed way too much on the story, and you lost most of it within that faith aspect of the book. All three books essentially had the same theme, where Ton gets beaten within an inch of his life, and everybody is just hoping that he makes it through. And it happened in all three books. There's also this constant feeling of, why do people want to hurt him? He's such a great man. He's so special. He's so humble. And everybody just adored this guy after he changed his life around, which is fine, but it just got to the point where it got really annoying and overdone. And also with Ton, he was constantly humbling himself and constantly stating how unworthy he was and not wanting to forgive himself or fully accept the forgiveness that was given to him. And that happened in all three of the books, where he wanted no recognition for anything, which is fine. The storyline and the trilogy itself was lost in all of those themes. The next book I read was Snow Like Ashes by Sarah Rash. Again, I'm awful with author pronunciations. Snow Like Ashes was an exhilarating read. I couldn't put it down. I think I read it in one night. And it is about a young girl named Mira and her fellow escapees from the destroyed kingdom of Winter. And I love the way the kingdom system is set up in this world. There's the rhythm kingdoms and the season kingdoms, and Winter has been destroyed by the season of spring. And each kingdom has a magical conduit, which represents either a male heir that can wield magic or a female heir that can wield magic. And with all these elements, it just poured into an excellent story. It just pulls in this great story of this group of escapees who are trying to find the second half of their magic conduit and save their kingdom from spring and bring their people back. There were so many surprises in this book. I was just blown away. I loved how it was done. I almost didn't see it coming, but once it happens, you could put all the pieces together, and I loved it. It was so many good surprises, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Characters were great. The love triangle, I actually didn't mind at all, which is weird because I don't like love triangles, but that one was actually done relatively well, so I really liked it. And the characters were awesome. I loved Mira. She was so kick-butt, such a strong female character. And Theron, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but I really liked him as a character. I wanted to get to know him. I wanted to read more about him. He was a book nerd who wanted the best for his kingdom, and I loved it. He was also a pretty strong and able fighter, and his character was just awesome. That is all the things I loved about Snow Like Ashes, but here's what I didn't like. Now this is going to get spoilery, so please mute me if you haven't read this book until I put my hand up, and then you can put me back on. One thing that I don't like in any of my books is sexual content in great detail. Now don't get me wrong, I love my romances, I don't mind kissing in books. I just don't like, especially if they're a young adult book, I don't like very detailed sexual content. And though this part of the book wasn't in great detail, it alluded to it in a way that you knew what was happening. And what it was actually describing is one of the villains using rape as a form of torturing and killing his victims. Now, while he is doing this to them, he also has one of their loved ones or friends chained to the wall in the room watching them. And this event does happen to the main character and one of her friends, and thankfully, though, she manages to escape before anything happens. But I cannot stand rape stories. It is not a form of entertainment for me. It is a real and horrible event that happens in people's lives, and it's not that we should hide it and we shouldn't talk about it or about its victims, but I just don't see it necessary as a form of entertainment in a book. Spoilers are finished. The next book I read was The Choosing by Rochelle Decker. Now, Rochelle Decker is the daughter of Ted Decker, who is a Christian thriller novel writer. I haven't read any of his books because he can get pretty dark with his themes. He has a lot of serial killer, murder type of mystery novels, and they're not really my taste. So I was a little apprehensive of picking up The Choosing, but I decided to give it a try after Sarah Ella recommended it on her channel and said it became one of her favorite books of the year. So I borrowed it off of Hoopla and gave it a try. It was amazing. Everybody needs to read this book. The whole premise of this book is that women in this society are only valuable if they are chosen. Their worth is in becoming a wife and a helpmate to a husband. So it's taking perspectives of the Bible and twisting it into the society that has a polluted sense of what the Bible means. The story begins at Carrington's own choosing banquet, where she was not chosen and has now become a lint of society, where she is stuck doing menial jobs for the rest of her life. She is not allowed to be with her family anymore, to get married, or to have a family of her own. What I loved about this book is the theme that Carrington learns throughout the book of being valuable and being valued, not because she is chosen. She learns that you are not valuable because you are chosen, but you are chosen because you are valuable. She learns that she is valuable because she is a beloved daughter of God, and that he loves her and values her, and that's why he has chosen her. So Carrington learns this from the people that she meets during her time as a lint. Now, while she is learning this, there is a murder mystery going on in the background that becomes pretty Criminal Mindsy, but it was really good. I was at the edge of my seat, wanting to know what happened. I couldn't stop reading this book. I was clicking through my computer screen constantly. It has become one of my favorite books of the year. I highly recommend it. So go check out The Choosing by Rochelle Decker. The next book I read was The Princess of the Silver Woods by Jessica Day George. This concludes the Princesses of Westfallen trilogy and is a Little Red Riding Hood / 12 Dancing Princesses retelling that continues on the 12 Dancing Princesses story from The Princess of the Midnight Ball. So in this book, Princess Petunia, the youngest princess of the 12 sisters, is traveling and is accidentally kidnapped by the wolves of the Westfallen Woods. As the story progresses, it wraps up the story very nicely, and finally everything is concluded. I don't want to give too much away because it is the third book in a sequel, but if you like fairy tale retellings, I do highly recommend this trilogy. The next book I read was a graphic novel. I read Nimona by Noelle Stephens. The next book was a graphic novel. I read Nimona by Noelle Stephens. I didn't mind the book. I felt the storyline, though, was pretty up in the air and some things weren't really fully explained. I didn't find the story as thrilling as I thought I would. I really enjoyed Nimona as a character. She was pretty adorable. Toward the end, you felt your heart breaking for her. But all in all, it wasn't my favorite. The next book I read was Right Where I Belong by Krista McGee. I loved Krista McGee's Anomaly series, so this was the first book I would try out of her contemporary book. She is a Christian YA author, so I thought I would check it out, and I was expecting a lot of cheese, a lot of fluff, and just those typical books I used to read in junior high. I was pleasantly surprised. I loved this book. Now, unfortunately, this is her latest book in her contemporary, and she does mention characters from her previous two books, First Date and Starring Me. So while reading this, I realized that these characters are talking about the conclusions of those books, so I did spoil myself a bit for Starring Me and First Date. The story is about Natalia, a young Italian girl who watches her father go through divorce after divorce after divorce. So the story opens with him announcing his latest divorce to her current stepmother, who is originally from Florida in the US. Natalia is upset. She truly loves her latest stepmother. She was the one who told her about God and who has mentored her and taught her about her faith. And she's just upset with her father that he never seems happy with any woman, and he's constantly going after the next young thing. And her stepmother, Maureen, is just devastated. She truly thought she had found the perfect man. Natalia then decides to go to Florida with her stepmother to help her during this difficult time. Now I'm expecting a lot of high school drama, high school cheese, a lot of fakey stuff, but I ended up thoroughly enjoying it. Now a lot of young Christian books that I read growing up seemed really flaky and made everything look really easy. Thankfully, in Krista McGee's book, not like Natalia went through the hardest struggles in her life, but what she did go through, Krista McGee wrote it that it was very practical to where she was. And I related so well to Natalia. Her desire to express her faith and talk about her faith with her unbelieving friends and to tell them how much God loved them, but not really knowing how to do that herself, and her drive and her desire to want to do that. I've been there. I have totally identified with that. And so that's what I loved about Natalia, was just her drive to want to do this. Also, I identified too a little bit with Maureen. Some people could say it got really tiring just to watch Maureen go through this depression and through this up and down and to be constantly moping. But that is realistic. I have gone through a divorce myself with my parents, and just watching the up and down roller coaster that it is, it was pretty realistic. It reminded me a lot of that, which was why this book was just so relatable and identifiable. And I loved how the faith aspect of this book wasn't preachy and in your face, but so practical to what kids these days are dealing with, and it gave it such a realistic expectation of how you would deal with this in real life, which is why I love this book. The characters as well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, I related to Natalia so well. I loved Brian. He seemed like such a fun guy. Like, after reading about Brian, he's a guy that I could actually imagine meeting in real life, which I really liked, because a lot of the junior high books I read growing up, guy was like tall, blonde, blue-eyed surfer guy from California that was just absolutely perfect in his Christian walk and seemed so unrealistic. But meeting the guys from Right Where I Belong, they were realistic. You could actually picture yourself meeting these people. And I have to say, I absolutely loved Lexi. That girl was laugh out loud adorable. I am her #1 fan. She is an excellent side character that should get her own book. And I have tweeted Krista McGee that I love Lexi and I think that she needs her own book. The next book I read was Reached. Reached is the 3rd book in the Matched trilogy by Ellie Condie. I liked Matched, and I have a whole rant about this in my Inside Out tag, but I didn't like the rest of the books, unfortunately. I won't go too much into detail because it is a trilogy, of course, and if you do want to read this book, I do still recommend for you to try it out. Some people have either liked it or disliked it. It's really your own pick of whether or not you're going to like it or not. Don't rely on my opinion or other people's opinions to sway you otherwise. I personally, for me, didn't enjoy the rest of the trilogy. I did like the first book, though. The next book I read was another Krista McGee book. I read First Date. After reading Right Where I Belong, I realized I should have read First Date and Starring Me before I read that 3rd book. They aren't really a trilogy, they're more like companion novels with including some of the same characters throughout the series. Same with Right Where I Belong, it is a young adult contemporary book based kind of in high school. This one follows Addie Davison, who I did read about in Right Where I Belong, then I realized I should have read this one first. Addie Davison is chosen from her school to go on a TV show called The Book of Love, where the president's young teenage son will be choosing his date for his prom. Now, it sounds super unrealistic and super high on the cheese factor, and though I really absolutely loved the premise of the story, and I thought it was going to be a fun cheesy read, it absolutely was. Now, not only do you get the high, unrealistic, fluffy matter, you also get this really good story and life lessons. The realisticness of the book, aside from the TV reality show, was spot on. And it wasn't preachy and in your face, again, which is what I really liked. It was everyday readable. So I do highly recommend First Date by Chris McGee. And that is a lot of books, and that is all of them that I read this month. As I said in my BookTube TBR, I am not doing an August TBR just because this summer I have been finding TBRs really hard to follow. See you guys next time.